So today, Bisping had Dean Amasinger on. He's the technical director of the UFC PI in Shanghai, China. And it was a really interesting conversation because I've had all these thoughts for years about, how this sport will go and everything. So to put it into context, the short version, I was born in 71, so I'm 52. When I was a kid, the only thing you really watched was boxing. So my uncles and cousins were boxers. My cousin is an amateur champ. Two of my uncles are in the Boxing Hall of Fame. When I was a kid, I wrestled in high school, and ever since I was real little, my cousin that's a champ would take me out and hitting heavy bag and whatever. So that was kind of what you did when you were a kid. There was no such thing as like the UFC or even mixed martial arts. It wasn't called mixed martial arts. You would see maybe magazines in, on a big rack, and there would be like karate or something like that, or maybe you might have some sort of a karate gym, like dojo, somewhere in the place you lived that you maybe could go to. But that was really rare when I was little too. It was more like you watched a movie and saw like Bruce Lee or something to that effect. That was all there is. There wasn't really anything else. As I got older, there was kind of the no holds barred thing. And then, the UFC obviously came out in 93. Just after it came out, whenever they put the videotape out, and I don't know how much longer after they put the videotape out, but that was when I saw it. One of my friends, Chris, was like a huge fan, like just off the charts. He was like, "This is the best thing ever." I'll never forget that. He's like, "You gotta watch it," and I'm like, "Okay." And I watched it, and I was kind of a little bit lukewarm for a while on it. It's a long story, but the point is, it's not been around that long. I mean, UFC just celebrated 30 years, so before that, there wasn't much. It was these, people have talked about it many times. There was these people that touch you and you fall down, and demonstrations, like the 12-6 elbow, and believe it or not, that stuff was like real-ish, It obviously isn't a real thing, but they really did do that in like demonstrations late at night about how you could hit a pressure point and kill somebody, and oh my gosh, thinking back, at the time it seemed ridiculous, but thinking back now with what we know now and fighting and mixed martial arts and stuff, you look at it and you go, oh my God, I can't even believe they put that on TV. Like, somebody believed that? It's not that as a kid we believed it, but we were just like, huh, that's weird, I don't know. Anyway, going forward, you look at now, the sport is accelerating so much. It's off the charts. It's hard, when you look it up, it's really hard to even tell, because I don't know, the numbers of viewership and people who are fairly serious fans go all the way from 300 million to 415. I saw numbers all over the place, somewhere in that realm. There's probably, I would say maybe 1,500 pro fighters. It's hard to find that number too. It goes from 1,000, but those are old numbers, and I've seen as high as around 2,000, but I don't know how accurate that is because there's all these different surveys and they're different, and I'll guess 1,500 pro fighters. That number is going to go through the roof, and there's a bunch of different reasons. The popularity of the sport. There are, I don't know how many pro organizations now. The big ones. Bellator just got bought by PFL, but there's two. You got one, and you have the UFC. Those are kind of the real big ones. But then you have KSW and M1 Global and You know, you've had ones in the past like Pride, and there are a lot. There are every fairly big country in the world. There's what, 200 and some countries in the world has one that does pro fights. It's not every country, but it's got to be over 100. And there are a lot of amateur and pro, smaller regional places and everything. There's a lot. And, you know, then you look at the TV shows. You got Road to the UFC, Looking for a Fight, Ultimate Fighter. One has a version of like The Apprentice, I think it's called. The Apprentice, One Apprentice or something to that effect. And they have other organizations have other different things like that. There's a lot of kind of grassroots stuff that's making it popular. You know, they talk about China had a Chinese champion. So when that first happened, it really spiked the, you know, people watching it and paying attention in China. China has what, 1 point something billion people. You know, that's huge. And then, you know, what Dean was talking about is, so the UFC PI, there are currently 2 of them. One is in Las Vegas. That's about 30,000 square foot. That's pretty big. The one in Shanghai is 93,000 square foot. That's huge. That's 3 times the size. That is, wow. So then, you know, I would encourage you to go and watch Bisping's show from today. And it was really fascinating. They have scholarships where you get a dorm room and you live on site and they take care of everything. They feed you and help you with your training, and that's a huge big thing, because when it first started, that wasn't even close to a thing. I mean, that's why a lot of fighters didn't wind up fighting, because they couldn't afford it. They had to work full-time job, and it came down to the job or fighting, and they picked the job because they had a family, kids, whatever. You can do it a little bit different way in there's a lot of possible ways to get through it and become a professional fighter at this point. That's what I mean to say. That's insane. Another thing he mentioned was Mexico PI is supposed to open in March, I guess. That's, you know, a month away. I mean, maybe 2 months, whatever, because it's the beginning. But then he mentioned Abu Dhabi, definitely there will be one. And the possibility of somewhere in Africa, probably Nigeria. Now, Dana has mentioned those things before, other people have. That's, wow. That would be 5 around the world. Can you imagine the acceleration in the sport if you had opportunities, especially somewhere like, let's say, Nigeria? How many people in Nigeria don't really have a path to success? Let's call being popular, successful, rich, whatever. Geez. What's the population of Lagos? It's huge. It's like 20 million or something. 15 million? That's just one city in Nigeria. So, it just blows my mind. I've always thought, and I've said a lot of times recently, that I think within 5 years, the sport is just exponential huge. I'm sticking to that. By like, say, 2030, it's going to be big.